Today I have an unusual brand that is called Kintsugi. The brand was founded in Czech Republic, but it is inspired by Japanese culture. What I love about this brand is their marketing. They created really beautiful, amazing descriptions of each scent, and these descriptions bring you to a totally new, dreamy world. It's like you close your eyes and you imagine being somewhere else. When I hear Japanese perfumes, I always get super excited. I generally love Japanese lifestyle, Japanese art, and although I have never been in Japan, this is a theme that always fascinates me. And I was very excited to discover this brand, but unfortunately, despite their descriptions and despite their inspirations, the perfumes represent mostly modern European trends. And what I mean by that is that the perfumers of the brand use a lot of modern molecules that I call modern amber masks. If you don't know how I feel about them, you could watch my video called I Hate Modern Ambers. Therefore, I think my descriptions will be brief. I will not get into these Japanese stories behind each fragrance. If you want, you can read each story on the website of the brand. And despite that they have a very long list of notes, I will focus on those that really stand out and they really determine the character of the fragrance. The fragrance that is the most hyped fragrance of the collection is called Luna. When I saw the rating of the fragrance on Fragrantica, I was like, okay, this is probably a safe spray, and I sprayed it on my neck. One thing I forgot is that I don't like orange blossom and neroli, and this fragrance is dominated by these two notes. Actually, neroli is not even listed in here, but I would say that I catch more neroli rather than orange blossom. And they really try to put a lot of sweetness in here, to the point that they included cotton candy in here, which is mostly sugar, to be honest. And it didn't save the fragrance for me. But if you are the lover of orange blossom and neroli, you might like this one as well. If I had to choose the fragrance that I liked the most in the box, that would be Phoenix. It's not really my style, I would say, but this is the one I appreciated the most as a creation. Phoenix is mostly a leather fragrance to my nose, but it has a lot of interesting nuances that don't really blend, and they could pop out here and there depending on your temperature, depending on your skin chemistry. The leather itself is created in an interesting way with some herbal accords and some smokiness. Incense, for example, is pretty strong at the beginning, and then there is a very interesting sweetness, and I think it was that sweetness that got me. I was not able to understand that sweetness on my own, and when I went to the notes, I saw that there is mandarin and pineapple in there. Despite that they are listed on the top of the pyramid, they actually last pretty long, and they are responsible for this sweet aura that make this fragrance unisex. Otherwise, we find a lot of notes that would be traditionally more on the male side. The impression of the fragrance that you might get from the description is that it's going to be quite intense and heavy, but Ambroxan kind of suppresses the intensity of these notes and keeps it light. The second fragrance that I liked in the set is called Carnal. I don't know particularly why I liked the fragrance. It's not specifically different than other fragrances of the set. It is still created with the modern amber masks. If I have to describe it with my own words, I would say that this is a complex woody fragrance that feels like a flow of different woody streams. It's like woods turned into liquid, and this is how these molecules are perceived by me, and somehow they interact and develop in a very interesting way, and I like the way it sounds on my skin. I think it definitely will be appreciated by those who like woody, slightly aromatic fragrances. The note that I find dominating, that is actually not even listed in here, is peppermint. There's something minty and refreshing about this fragrance. As for the other notes, they barely make any sense to me. Another fragrance where my perception could not be further away from the actual description is called Hanzo. Hanzo has a greenish color of the liquid. I was sure that the rose is running the show in here. In fact, the rose is not even in the pyramid. I would describe it as a soapy rose with a modern ambery woody base. It is not more unique than any other fragrance in the set. The only interesting element is fir resin, which is often associated with modern amberes, and it often is put in the pyramid, but we don't really smell it so much. For example, Baccarat Rouge has fir resin in the pyramid as well. Here it does really smell like fir resin. The fragrance where woody and aromatic elements did not come together in a way to create a good impression on me is called Taom. This is supposed to be a citrusy fragrance, but I would say that the citrusy elements are not the ones that characterize it the most. The first impression that I had in my mind when I smelled it is the ocean floor that has moss and the smell of salt and humidity. And at the same time, while I'm walking on this ocean floor with the tides, somewhere very far there is a public toilet, and there is a smell of public toilet. I tried it several times, I tried it on my skin. This association keeps popping out. Meanwhile, there is something interesting that I catch in here that I associate with the smell of green tea. When I realized that somewhere between all these modern amber masks and woods, I get the note of green tea, it brought me to the fragrance that is called Open Mind by the brand called State of Mind. They have a lot in common. The notes like crismum and blue cypress and citruses and moss, they are common for both fragrances. So if you like one fragrance, you are very likely to like another. The fragrance that looked the most interesting on paper is called Kaigan. And I was very curious how these woody and aromatic elements would play with the fig and salt and civet. It's like too much from different worlds. And unfortunately, they didn't really play in a way that made the perfume likable for me. Some people might like it because I know that the note of salt is very popular nowadays, especially woody, salty fragrances. The only one that I like in this category is called Bois d'Iris, which is probably more of an exception. So this one I didn't like so much, and even the sweetness of fig did not save the fragrance for me. The animalic part of the fragrance is described in the pyramid as civet. But as you know, the animalic secretions are no longer used in perfumeries, so I suspect that this note of civet is created by ambrosinide that to my nose smells mostly like acetone, urine, something animalic, yet woody. I would not say that this woody animalic character is very strong in this fragrance, but it's definitely something I do feel and something that makes me dislike the fragrance. Another fragrance in the collection that has a very similar base is called Deus. But I assure you, there is no oud in here. It does not even smell like anything close to oud. The interesting element in here that is lavender. It's slightly sweet, and I wish we had a bit more of it. Maybe it would make the fragrance a bit better. And the last fragrance that I have in the set is called Santal. This one is probably the most boring, the most predictable one. You know, at one point, Santal of Le Labo was very famous. Every brand wanted to have Santal in their collection. Most of the time, they would take this same Santal that now I call Santal with pickles and dill, and then they would just create variations of this Santal. So here it's exactly the same story. They took this Santal as a base, and then they just added these modern ambers that are pretty strong enough to even suppress this Santal. But a lot of people like these modern ambers. A lot of people are searching for these variations of different modern ambers. And if this is your case, for sure you would appreciate the brand called Kintsugi. I would say that the perfumers have an interesting way of working these modern amber masks. But overall, this brand would be appreciated by those who love woody scents or those who are mostly anosmic to these modern ambers. Unfortunately, this is not my case, and when I catch these modern ambers, this is all I feel in the fragrance, and I cannot really feel much more beyond it, because these modern ambers, they just annoy my nose, and it's really hard for me to appreciate the good part about the fragrance. The least I was hoping to find in here is tea. To my surprise, not a single fragrance has a tea note. I actually found it in some fragrances somewhere between the lines. This is more of a side effect from woody aromatic notes combined with citruses specifically. But well,